Hello again, everyone, and welcome to another video lecture for Psych 370. This is going to be a pretty brief one, but in it, I'm going to continue covering applications of classical conditioning with you by talking a little bit about how classical conditioning can be used in advertising. First, though, before I can do that, I need to say a little bit about something called evaluative conditioning, what we call evaluative conditioning, which gets its name from the idea that our evaluation of something, our liking of something, for example, the amount we like a particular stimulus, can be changed by pairing that stimulus with something else that we already like or dislike. That's how evaluative conditioning works. And I mean, that's really just classical conditioning, right? So if you take this neutral stimulus and you pair it with something else that a person likes or dislikes, then they're going to learn to associate those stimuli, right? And so they'll probably come to like or dislike that previously neutral stimulus too. So evaluative conditioning is really just a specific example of classical conditioning. It's a form of classical conditioning, as I've said here on the slide, but it definitely happens. It's definitely a thing. So for example, evaluative conditioning may be involved in how you come to like or dislike certain people. Because think about it. If you participate in a lot of activities that you really enjoy with a particular person, then you're essentially pairing that person with those activities. And as a result, you might come to like that person more because now you associate them with these activities that you like, right? Or as this little cartoon illustrates, it could go the other way. So, for example, if you always get painful shots from a particular nurse, then chances are that nurse is not going to be your favorite person, right? So, evaluative conditioning could affect how you feel about certain individuals. And evaluative conditioning is also the basis for much of what's done in advertising, where the product being promoted is paired with things that most people probably already like in an effort to bring about in them a preference for that product. So, in other words, when you use evaluative conditioning in advertising, you treat the product that's being advertised as a conditioned stimulus and you pair it with something that people are already fond of. And so that something is the unconditioned stimulus. And so these are pretty obvious examples of that. So again, you take something that most viewers, at least most of the viewers that you're targeting, are going to evaluate positively, like an attractive person, a pretty beach, Santa Claus, humor, catchy music, something like that. And then you pair that thing with your product. So you try to get people to evaluate your product more positively. You try to get people to hold more favorable attitudes towards your product, whether they consciously realize it or not, by getting them to associate your product with this other thing that they like. That's the idea. And guys, there is evidence that this technique does in fact work. At least it works if the product that you're advertising is initially neutral for the consumer. So as long as they don't lean too much one way or the other with your product, as long as they don't already like it or dislike it, then you can change their attitude toward that product through evaluative conditioning. So for example, if you take a look at page 114 of your textbook, then you'll see a name there that you might recognize. So in a study by Ferris State's own Chris Redker, shout out to Dr. Redker, novel unfamiliar brands of root beer were paired with a country music song that in a previous study had been rated favorably by people who enjoy country music and unfavorably by people who don't enjoy country music. So each participant got pairings of a novel brand of root beer with this song that they either liked or didn't like. And what the results showed was that later, after those pairings, the country music listeners in the study demonstrated a greater preference for the root beer brand they saw, and the non-country music listeners actually demonstrated a greater preference for the root beer brand that they hadn't seen. So they preferred the one that they didn't associate with the country music song over this one that they did. And so, guys, that study and others like it suggest that pairing a novel brand with a negatively evaluated stimulus can bring about more negative attitudes toward that brand. But pairing a novel brand with a positively evaluated stimulus can bring about more positive attitudes. And so, in this case, people who liked country music came to like the brand of root beer that had been paired with the country music song, but people who didn't like country music came to dislike the brand that had been paired with the song. And so, in light of results like these, advertisers would be well advised to begin to use or to continue to use evaluative conditioning in their marketing campaigns. Although, as your book mentions, they would also be well advised to avoid the backward or simultaneous conditioning procedures that many commercials utilize. So, in a lot of cases, it's not until the end of the ad that you actually see the logo or the image of the product being advertised, right? You may not even know what's being advertised until the end of the ad. And as we learned a few weeks ago, backward conditioning procedures like those are typically ineffective. So remember, the product being advertised is the conditioned stimulus here, right? That's the stimulus that you want to change how people respond to with your ad. And so it's a better idea to present that product first. You want to show that product, you want to present that CS first before you show the smiling people, the music, the humor, or whatever it is that you're using as the US. So again, that's just a more reliable way to get people to acquire a new response, a conditioned response to a conditioned stimulus. And so, in other words, a better understanding of how classical conditioning actually works could help advertisers make their commercials more effective in bringing about actual changes in consumer attitudes. Okay, well, that's all I have for you for now about evaluative conditioning and advertising. So please let me know if you have any questions, and I hope you have a great day. Take care, guys.